Alright, people. Review of the week time. Let's start with some of the fights that happened over the weekend. Did anyone see that show over in Russia? I think it was in Russia anyway, where John O'Carroll, he was fighting, I think he was fighting an Olympian. Now, he got stopped in round 9, but it was a pretty damn good fight while it went on. I mean, it was fought at a frantic pace. Carroll ultimately got taken out in the 9th round. Even in round number 8, he was you could see he was on the verge of getting stopped then, but if you haven't seen it, I'm sure if you just type it into YouTube. In fact, actually, I think it was on YouTube. It was a pretty fun little scrap. I also seen there was a Fight Zone card on last night. They had it on YouTube. And I was there was a few people on that show, the likes of Katie Healy, who I've seen in the past. But I was mainly looking to see how Dave Allen looked. Because Dave Allen his name is being chucked around there with Johnny Fisher. Now, Johnny Fisher, in case you didn't know, he is out again on the undercard of Jack Catterall. Jack Catterall versus Regis Prograis in Manchester in the end of August. Now, Johnny Fisher, they're looking for an opponent. He really could go tomorrow if he wanted to. And because obviously the Anna Babbage fight was so easy. They've mentioned Dave Allen's name. And listen, I've said before, I would rather not see Dave Allen fight just because of the beatings he's taken over the course of his career. If they were to do him against Johnny Fisher, it would more than likely end in Johnny Fisher winning the fight by knockout. But saying that, if they did Dave Allen versus Moses Atelma, I would say the same. I think Dave Allen, although he is still tough, I think his will is not what it used to be. We've seen that in the Frazier-Clarke fight. He really did in that fight. And that wasn't a fight that he was taking a massive beating or anything like that. But he just seemed to have no will there, no hunger to fight. Yeah, he won a 4-rounder over the weekend. I think he said in the post-fight interview this was his 5th fight in 5 years. And it's around about that. He retired in 2020 after that sparring session with Alexander Usyk. Didn't fight again, I think, until 22. And it's been kind of just a show now and then and stuff like that. But he acknowledged in the interview that if he went in with Johnny Fisher next, he'd lose. And it wouldn't even be just that he'd lose, he'd be taken out pretty damn quick. So he is saying that he wants to get himself into a position where he can compete with these guys at domestic level, which sounds good on paper, but he's been saying that for years. He's been saying that for years. He's been saying that, I've had this fight, now it's time to take things serious, and he never does. So, I would imagine Eddie Hearn is going to be working hard, because I guarantee you he's saying, I'm going to take it serious, and Eddie Hearn will say, here's a check for $250,000, do you want that? Yep, see it, done, that's it. Most likely. We'll wait and see there who they announce as an opponent for Johnny Fisher. At the end of the day, he can go straight away after fighting Dave Allen. Or sorry, not after fighting Dave Allen, after fighting Alan Babbage. But I think what they will want for Johnny Fisher is they'll want to get a Dave Allen type of fighter. And what I mean by that is they're going to want to get someone who the public would know, because there's still, obviously, I know Johnny Fisher brings a big fan base. They'll want someone that the public would know of, at least, who, a bit like Alan Babbage, isn't dangerous, although on paper it looks like it'll be a challenge, sort of way, because I don't think if they just dug some journeyman out who no one heard of, yeah, he'd still sell tickets, but I don't know if that would appeal to the casual audience as much as someone who they kind of maybe would be a little bit familiar with, but let's wait and see on that one. I also seen Bob Arum dug Tevin Farmer out and put him in there with one of his fighters, Raymond something his name was. Now, I didn't see the fight, it was actually on Sky Sports, but he won. Tevin Farmer, do you remember a couple of years ago he was with Matchroom and they were actually talking about him potentially fighting Tank Davis? Do you remember that? Could you imagine Tevin Farmer against Tank Davis? Good lord. The main card that was on over the course of the weekend was this one right here, which was headlined by Jerron Boots Ennis. Now, I see Sky Nicholson made a defender for title. Didn't see the fight, but she made a successful defender for title. Jali Hackett beat Peter Dobson on 10 round points decision. I didn't see the fight myself. Now, obviously, I knew going into the fight that Peter Dobson came across as someone who was quite tough. We seen him against Conor Benn back in February. Very slow welterweight. There is a little bit of something there, but the speed is not really there for him. But he's definitely tough. He definitely takes a good shot. Went the distance again, won a couple of rounds. So I think Peter Dobson, although he's not winning these fights, he's game and he's durable. And a lot of promoters will want that. They'll want a guy who is game, who is durable, who is going to make these prospects, if nothing else, think and work for the win. So another loss, but he'll probably get some more paydays off the back of that. To be honest with you, he probably will. And then we obviously get to the main event, Jerome Boots Ennis versus David Avanesian. As I said in my post-fight review, I thought it was a pretty good performance, a workman-like performance from Jerome Boots Ennis. He beat David Avanesian, who came in on a month's notice, 4 weeks' notice. He wasn't expected to do much. He did have moments of success. I will say that I will nitpick and say the defense from Boots Ennis needs to improve, because he got hit with shots that he wasn't hit with many shots, but he was hit with silly shots that he should be able to defend and see coming, or at the very least block. So that's going to be a worry, because Avanesian has decent power again at European level. He's a solid European level fighter. At world level, you can't be that lax in your defense. You just can't do it. You're not going to get away with it, and you're going to be in there with guys who can hit just as hard, harder, and they can put their shots together. They're accurate. They'll be able to know, okay, he's open to this shot, he's open to that shot. They'll be able to work around. They'll be able to time you. So he's going to want to have to be careful moving forward, Boots Ennis, in terms of defense. But other than that, I think we've seen the speed, the punching power, the accuracy. I like what I seen in there from Boots Ennis. I really did. And, ultimately he beat the fight completely out of David Avanesian in the fifth round, which was his best round up until he got dropped, David Avanesian. I think at that point, the fight is just done. It's gone. The fight is well and truly gone from that fighter. So that's what happened there. In terms of what he does next, Turki Al-Sheikh says, I've just reached out to Jaron Ennis and Eddie Hearn to congratulate them on the win, and I'd love to see Ennis fight Crawford at the weight of 154 pounds soon. Now, I said this in my post-fight review, and I stand by this. Turki Al-Sheikh has been great for boxing. He absolutely has. The fights he's talking about putting on, the fights he has put on, the cards he's put on, it's been incredible. It really has been incredible, and he's done a lot of good for boxing. And this is just a minor nitpick. It's not even him me necessarily critiquing him. He does say a lot of the time, I want to do this fight and I want to do it. And he's naming like two people when, I'll give you an example, right? When Anthony Joshua beat Francis Ngannou, it was Fury Joshua, and you're like, mate, you've got the Usyk fight signed. It was Canelo Crawford. Now it's Boots Crawford. But it's like, what is it? Who is it? What is it? What's going on there? So he does have a tendency, I think, to be a bit reactionary and just kind of, say, we're going to try and get this fight done next, or we're going to do this next, then we're going to do it. You're like, calm it down. You said, which one do you want? So I kind of take what he says there with a grain of salt, but in reality, you have to say that Crawford is the only real fight to make. And to be honest with you, welterweight, it's a strange time in the welterweight division, because welterweight has consistently been a division which has been strong. Like, you go through the decades, welterweight has always been a division where you're seeing good, solid, strong fighters, really, really good fighters, elite fighters. It seems very thin for talent now, doesn't it? The sooner the better the guys from 140 move up, the likes of Ryan, the likes of Devin, the likes of Lopez, even Josh Taylor, the likes of those. Because it's really quite... that's why I'm surprised that Josh Taylor never moved up to 147 when he did, because you take Crawford out of the equation. It's really... And, Spencer's obviously going to 154. You take those guys out of the equation, it's quite thin on the surface now. Obviously, Boots is the guy, because Virgil Ortiz has moved up. And, yeah, it seems like 154 and 140. It's weird, because you'd never think welterweight would be the kind of odd one out, where you're literally waiting for these guys to go to 147 so you can, start to see the really, really good fights. So Lopez, Devin, I would imagine Ryan's going to be campaigning there from now on. I can't see him going to 140 anytime soon. So you're kind of just sitting around waiting for those guys to make the move to 147 and see how it goes and kind of get a bit of life back into the division. So that is a good fight to make. I would probably prefer to see him versus, as in like Boots Ennis versus Terence Crawford, than I would Canelo Crawford, but let's wait and see. Shakur Stevenson was in attendance last night. He says he has welcomed a potential fight with William Zepeda next. I'd love to see that fight. I would. I'd love to see that fight. I think it would be absolutely brilliant. I also seen that the Zone announced a couple of fight shows that'll be on. Dalton Smith will fight for the vacant European 140-pound title against a man by the name of John Fernandez. Let's have a quick look-see at who John Fernandez is, because again, I have to say I haven't seen this guy. It rings no bells. Okay, so he's a Spanish fighter. He's coming out the back of a win against Hazel Corrales. I think I remember him. I think he was WBA champion at one point a couple of years ago. Yes, he was. I remember him. I remember he beat that Japanese guy in 2 rounds with a big knockout. I remember that fight, actually. He lost to Samuel Molina, Michael Rivera, Oshaki Foster. Seems like whenever he stepped up, he's been found wanting. But let's see how he would get. Let's see how he would deal European level. So Dalton Smith, has there already been no other fights announced for that particular card? So that's who Dalton Smith is in there with next. Now, you may remember Dalton Smith, and again, this is a critique of Ben Shalom, and it's just typical of Ben Shalom, really. Dalton Smith, I believe, is mandatory for the EBU title, and at the time it was held by Adam Azim. Adam Azim won that title. He fought, I forget who he fought, but he won that title and has now vacated it, and we still haven't had the announcement of the Harlem Eubank fight, but that's who he's apparently going to be fighting, a guy who's not even won a British title. Now, the excuse that Ben Shalom was given, oh, well, he's not ready. Ben Shalom, excuse me, you were willing to put him in at European level, so he's ready for European level, but he's just not ready for Dalton Smith. Get the F out of here. You're willing to put him in at European level, he's got to be willing to defend it. Tough you know what. If he's not ready, don't put him in there at all. It's as simple as that. And I would say that about, I mean, imagine Anthony Joshua when he beat Charles Martin, if he'd have turned around and just vacated that title and said, oh, we're not ready for world title. Or worse, if he had kept it and said, you know, oh, I'm still a contender like Deontay Wilder did, you know. So I don't, this could be a really, really good fight. You know, I'd have a look at John Fernandez, but I would have preferred to have seen Dalton Smith, Adam Azim, definitely. I also seen Diego Pacheco will face Selecki. I think it's Maya Selecki. I've seen Selecki a few times. He's not a terrible fighter by no stretch of the imagination, but he's a kind of fringe world level opponent. Diego Pacheco, I think, is brilliant. I did hear rumours that he was meant to be facing Jason Quigley. Clearly, he won't be facing him, but that was a rumour I was hearing. He's normally durable, Selecki, to be fair. So we'll have a look at this. I think Pacheco is brilliant. I think he's extremely talented, a very talented super middleweight. I did also see that Danny Jacobs, in a lengthy post, has announced his retirement from boxing at the age of 37 years old. And I tip my hat off to Danny Jacobs. I loved watching Danny Jacobs in his prime. Danny Jacobs was a great fighter in his prime. I really do. I really did think that. And him losing to Shane Mosley Jr., I don't mean any disrespect to Shane Mosley Jr., but I never rated him. I always thought he was very, very poor. And for Danny Jacobs to be losing to him, when if you were talking about a peak Danny Jacobs, he would have knocked Shane Mosley Jr. out. Because Danny Jacobs was a big puncher in his prime. A very big puncher. I remember his fight against Peter Quillen. Remember that well, where he knocked Quillen out in a round. And I remember his couple of fights with Sergio Mora. Stopped Sergio Mora on both occasions. I think he stopped him. I know he stopped him in the second fight. I'm pretty sure he stopped him in the first fight too. I enjoyed Danny Jacobs' career. I really did. I thought he beat Triple G. I did, and I'm a big fan of Triple G, but I felt that Danny Jacobs won that fight. The knockdown, even with the knockdown, I still felt he won. I think the knockdown definitely didn't help him, but if I recall the scorecards, I don't think it would have made much of a difference. I think it would have maybe been a split decision had it not been for the knockdown. Unlucky. I said in a recent video that I'd never seen a fighter take such little damage but go over the hill so quickly. And I did forget that Danny Jacobs did suffer from quite severe cancer back in the day. I know he has the scar on his back. That's where he gained the name The Miracle Man. I forget. I'm going to say he had to learn to walk. I think he might have. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But I did forget about that, and that will take it out of you, you know. So 37 years old, he can retire with all his faculties in check. He's made a lot of money from boxing. He was a great fighter. 2-time middleweight champion of the world. Great fighter was Danny Jacobs. So tip my hat off to him. I was always a big fan. Hopefully we can maybe see him in a maybe kind of punditry role or something like that. Who knows? But there we go. What else do we have here? Eddie Hearn's revealed he's been in contact with Luis de Cubas, who worked closely with Al Heyman PBC, for the possibility of Jesse Bam Rodriguez versus Fernando Martinez as a WBA, IBF, WBC unification fight. Bam Rodriguez, I love watching Bam Rodriguez. I really, truly do. Jose Ramirez will now face Arnold Barbarossa. It's reportedly set and finalised for September the 28th. He should be rematching Sean McComb. There's no way in hell he won that fight. He should be doing his... I feel he should be doing what's necessary and giving him a rematch. There's no way in hell he won that fight. But, Jose Ramirez still has a little bit left, to be fair. He does. Ryan Garcia has issued an apology on Instagram. I finally decided to get some help. I'm going to rehab in the next couple of months. You're going to see a change. Well, you're banned until April next year, so you have all the time in the world, really, from now till then. Yeah, look, Ryan Garcia. He definitely appeared... Look, Ryan Garcia, that post he made, or those several posts he made, were beyond stupid. He definitely needs to... Ryan Garcia won't be around long term. But I don't mean that in the sense of he'll be gone as in dead or anything like that. No, but in terms of boxing, he's never going to stick around long term. He is in his mid-20s. You can't live that life. You can't be drinking as much as he apparently is drinking. If it's bad enough he needs to go rehab, it's got to be pretty bad. So I hope he's okay. I hope he gets himself cleaned up. And yeah, look, I don't really know what more else to say about it. I just hope he sorts himself out and he can just sort himself out. There is a good fighter there. And as a fan, I love watching Ryan Garcia. I really do. I just hope he can sort himself out, to be honest with you. And enough with that, nonsense about getting drunk and posting what he posted. I mean, Jesus Christ. So yeah, that's what I got to say on that. I did see this Yalabek Aleem Kanuli. His fight was cancelled. So that was actually meant to take place this weekend. Apparently he fainted while cutting weight Thursday evening and was hospitalised due to severe dehydration. That's really not good. Yeah, that happened to Virgil Ortiz a few times. And you hear some horror stories in the UFC about fighters cutting weight and some of the things they've gone through. Look, if your body is shutting down and your body is telling you enough, then you got to move up in weight. I'm sure at 160 he feels that he has the size advantage, and look, Aleem Kanuli is a good fighter, but enough's enough. I mean, you are taking so much out of yourself to do that weight. You got to say it like it is. You got to say enough is enough. And I think enough is enough for him at middleweight, and that'll be the end of that. The WBA or WBC have given a 1 week extension for Dave Benavidez to choose which mandatory position he wants to go for. He holds both the interim at 168 and 175 pounds. He must decide if it's going to be Canelo Alvarez or the winner of Beterbiev Bivol moving forward. Watch and see if he decides Canelo, the WBC won't call that mandatory. If he decides 175 pounds, I guarantee you they will. I guarantee you. Virgil Ortiz has signed a multi-year. Oh, I don't like hearing that. Multi-year. Multi-fight's different. Multi-year. Extension with Golden Boy. To be fair, they have been doing good work with him. I like Virgil Ortiz. I think he's a good fighter, and they have been doing some good work with him, but I don't like fighters for signing multi-year extensions. I don't. I think that a multi-fight deal is better. If you sign a 5-fight deal, it's very different to it being a 5-year deal. A 5-year deal, you're stuck. You might have 5 fights in 5 years. You might have less. You don't know. If you get into a dispute with the promoter, you're tied in. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with a multi-year deal. I don't like seeing. Now, the only time I would say it's okay, for me, if I was advising a fighter, the only time I would say, yeah, sign a multi-year deal, or I would say it's probably better off that you do sign a multi-year deal, is if you're starting out. If you've just come from the amateurs, if you're starting out, if you maybe didn't have much of an amateur background, you just get lucky and you get a multi-year deal. I would say, yeah, do that, because at the end of the day, you're going to be kept active. You're going to be on shows. You're probably going to be the A side. It'll help you along the way to have a promoter backing you. But when you get to a certain point, like when you get to the prospect stage, that's when you don't want to be, or you get past prospect stage, I should say, you don't want to be tied in. If you can make anyway decent money and you can do 3 fights this promoter, 3 fights that promoter, and you're making good money and you're not tied in long term, that's better than being tied in long term. Because let's say your relationship with a promoter goes south and you're on a 3 fight deal, you've had 2 fights, 1 more fight, you're done. That's it. You don't need to go down the legal road. You don't need to do any of that stuff. You can just 1 fight, it's done. If you're in the middle of a 5-year deal and you're 3 years into it, and then you start having problems with the promoter, you don't feel he's doing enough, you don't feel he's delivering on his promises, you're not active enough, you've got 2 years left, and going through the courts could cost you money, it could take a lot of time, and you might get out of a 5-year deal in 4.5 years. It's not worth it. So I don't like seeing fighters sign multi-year deals, but some of them do. Anthony Joshua has a lifetime deal with Matchroom, which I really don't like, especially considering the fact that Anthony Joshua, being such a big name, it's mental he's not going down the Canelo Alvarez road of just kind of the highest bidder who wants to fight. I think that's mental. I think he is absolutely mental for not doing that. But that's the way Anthony Joshua has chose to do his career. In terms of Anthony Joshua, I did obviously talk in several videos about Anthony Joshua, and I'll go and I'll reiterate what I said in those videos, that over the last week, when you're hearing the like Simon Jordan, Carl Froch and others talk about Anthony Joshua and be so scathing and so critical, while at the same time, now Carl Froch, to be fair to him, he's just scathing of everybody, but he really does seem to give Anthony Joshua way more criticism than I feel is actually valid. And you know, with Carl Froch, you do kind of have to laugh, because you're like, well, you know, you mentioned your legacy and your legacy and your legacy, but when you actually look at it, you know, it's no different than Anthony Joshua's. You know, your best win is Mikhail Kessler, and over the hill Mikhail Kessler, who you scraped the decision against, and he retired then after. You know, you could argue that Joshua's best win is Vladimir Klitschko. Again, Klitschko was not at his best, and he retired then after. But what's the difference between fighting a Vladimir Klitschko, who was near the end, and Carl Froch having to avenge a loss that he suffered against Mikhail Kessler, who again, it was also his last fight. And Carl Froch beat Mikhail Kessler nowhere near as convincing as Joe Calzaghe beat a peak Mikhail Kessler. You know, so you really have to look at that and put it in context and say, well, you know, you critique the Klitschko fight, but like we could easily, and we are, critiquing the Kessler win. Kessler was a great fighter. It's no mistake, he was a great fighter, but you fought him in his last fight and you scraped the decision against him. Joe Calzaghe, who was a guy who, you know, you saw Joe Calzaghe, I would have beaten. Well, I know styles make fights, and that's why I think Joe Calzaghe would have beat the living crap out of Carl Froch, because styles do make fights. Joe Calzaghe, yeah, I will say he had no trouble with him, but he beat him a lot more convincing than Carl Froch did. You know? So, and Carl Froch, you know, Carl Froch is the type of guy, you know, he would critique Joe Calzaghe, where he's like, well, Joe Calzaghe doesn't... I remember, who was it? I remember, where was it he said it? He was like, well, Joe Calzaghe doesn't think he needs to fight me, you know, blah, 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 blah. This is when I think he was mandatory for Calzaghe. But then he's, you know, like, well, I don't need to fight James DeGale. When James DeGale was mandatory, it's like, well, hang on a minute. Oh, because I'll beat... You don't know that. You know? So, that's Carl Froch, Simon Jordan... I think the critique they have for Joshua, they go way overboard with it. Unbelievably overboard with it. The British Boxing Board of Control have confirmed that Fabio Wardley, there will be a purse bid to determine when that fight will be taking place again next. We've heard virtually nothing about it. You know, but there was rumours that it was going to be on the undercard of Joshua versus Dubois. It clearly isn't. I don't know what's happening with that fight now, to be honest with you. Ben Shalom, surely he'll be looking to do that, certainly on a Sky Fight Night. Let's have a look-see. So, let's have a look-see on boxing scene. Teofimo Lopez suggests Brian Norman Jr. at welterweight is next. Brian Norman Jr., I can't say that name rings a bell. His run at 140 pounds, Teofimo Lopez, with the exception of Josh Taylor win, has been pretty lackluster, if I'm honest, with the exception of that. What else do we have here? We just look through the boxing scene articles to finish up here. Let's see. Jacobs retires. Sky Nicholson, yep, she gets a whitewash win. Fair play to her. Let's see. Not a great deal now, I gotta say. And you know, it's been a boxing over the last kind of couple of weeks, there's been not a lot going on. There's been an awful lot not going on, I should say, in the world of boxing. There's been very little to talk about, very little to discuss. I mean, I did see Chocolatito. Oh, actually, I forgot to talk about that. I did see him fight on... I didn't watch the fight live, but he fought on Friday night in his home country in Nicaragua. Beat the living crap out of the guy, dropped him in rounds 9, dropped him in rounds 8. I'm amazed the referee in Nicaragua let the fight... The fight went 10 rounds. It was a 10-rounder. Chocolatito got the stoppage in the 10th round. It really should have been stopped after round 8. If you watch the fight, Chocolatito doing what Chocolatito does. Beating the living crap out of his opponent, looking amazing, letting the shots go. Just a living legend. Ramon Chocolatito Gonzalez is. He absolutely is. He really is. He really is. Honestly, even looking through boxing scene, there is literally nothing to talk about with regards boxing. It's been very quiet over the last few weeks. It really, really has been very quiet. And I noticed that with other content creators as well. We're not seeing as much from... Now, I know Ade's situation, obviously, it's a bit different, but Hatman, people like that, we're not seeing much from any of them, because there's just not much to talk about. So I try and get as much out as I can, but this month is a quiet month in terms of boxing so far anyway. Wait and see, it'll come to life now in the next few weeks. I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button if you could, hit subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. And as always, lads and lassies, I'll leave it there. Hope you all have a great week. I always get that in there. Hope you all have a great week. Something good happens. Peace.